What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the neighborhood. My name is Andrew Kimball,
And I'm Aubrey Kimball.
and in this video, we're talking about Gotham Knights. If someone were to describe this game to you, they would probably say something like, Gotham Knights is an action role-playing game developed by Warner Bros. Games Montreal and published by Warner Bros. Interactive Entertainment, and that it is inspired by the Batman Gotham Knights comic series based on the DC Comics character Batman, and his supporting cast known as the Bat Family. The game lets players control Nightwing, Robin, Batgirl, or Red Hood as they attempt to fill the shoes of their mentor since his untimely death.
That same someone might also tell you that this game is presented from the third-person perspective, and the gameplay centers around combat and traversal, with each of the 4 playable characters having unique abilities that affect their approach to missions. They would probably go on to explain that this is an open-world game where the player can freely explore Gotham City and take on missions from recognizable characters and beat up thugs in the streets, and that the entire game can be played in drop-in, drop-out co-op with a friend.
While all of this is true, it doesn't give you the full story. And no, we're not referring to the fact that Gotham Knights was lucky enough to become the victim of this year's games industry dogpile.
We're talking about the fact that Gotham Knights is the best superhero dress-up game that we've had since Marvel's Spider-Man and Spider-Man Miles Morales. Looking past the confusing way in which you collect generic materials to craft weapons and outfits, and the somewhat cumbersome menu system that you have to navigate to get to the best part of this game, dressing your hero in whatever new style you unlocked and showing it off to your co-op partner in the rooftops of Gotham is pure fun and should not be understated.
At the beginning of every nightly patrol, we would show each other our sick new capes and cowls, and take a handful of screenshots. Then it was off to whatever objective we had to accomplish in order to unlock new suit styles or color palettes.
The stuff in between the fashion shows was overall a pretty mediocre experience. One in which the heroes of the game are attempting to uncover the mysteries of a secret society known as the Court of Owls. To do this, they have to beat up thugs on the street for information, and then beat up thugs in a different location, and then beat up thugs in an instance location that will lead to a boss fight with one of 3 potential side villains who are up to no good.
The overall gameplay is fine. It's like beating a dead horse to say that it doesn't live up to the Arkham games. But on its own, it's a straightforward, simple beat-em-up that is fun with a friend and frustrating to get through as a solo player. The storyline is exciting in the beginning, with an interesting setup and mysterious villain faction. Unfortunately, the level of mystery is comparable to an episode of Scooby-Doo, and the ending manages to jump the shark and fall flat all at the same time. The characters are the most generic and simplified versions of themselves they could possibly be, and without Alfred, the entire cast would be pretty unlikable. The game also has a lot of technical issues, from small things like getting stuck on the environment all the time, to much bigger issues like the many game crashes we both had.
Thankfully, none of that matters, because when this game shifted somewhere in development from a live service game to attempting to be a story-based third-person action game, probably somewhere around the release of Marvel's Avengers, the developers were smart enough to leave in all of the weird and generic loot chests, craftable weapons, and outfits.
Gotham Knights is an S-tier superhero dress-up game that requires you to play a C-tier action game in order to engage with it. If you and a friend like superhero stories and want to hang out for a few nights while beating up thugs and playing dress-up, then Gotham Knights is the perfect game for you. Otherwise, I would wait for a sale or skip it altogether. We had fun with this game, but it needed some more time in development. It's a shame too, because the core concept behind it could have been something truly special. Have you played Gotham Knights? What did you think of it? Let us know in the comments. If you enjoyed this review, please like the video and subscribe to the channel for more reviews and other topics in gaming. And remember, stay friendly, gamers.